Most people think changing their life requires more money, more effort, or more time. But the real shift begins somewhere quieter, almost invisible, and far more powerful than all three combined. It starts with how you see things, because your mindset quietly decides what you notice, what you ignore, and ultimately, what you believe is even possible in your financial life. Two people can earn the same income, live in the same environment, and face similar expenses. Yet, over time, their financial outcomes drift apart in ways that seem almost impossible to explain. The difference is rarely visible in the beginning, because it lives in small daily decisions shaped by beliefs about money, time, risk, and what kind of future is actually worth building. Most people fall into a pattern. They trade their time for money, then use that money to recover from the exhaustion created by constantly trading their time away. It feels normal because everyone around them is doing the same thing, waking up early, working long hours, and hoping that eventually all that effort will finally lead somewhere better. But hidden inside this routine is a quiet trade-off, where each hour sold reduces the amount of time you actually control, even if your income gradually starts increasing. At first, more income feels like progress, but over time, it often brings more responsibility, more pressure, and less flexibility, creating a cycle that becomes harder to step away from. This is where mindset quietly shapes direction, because without changing how you think, you simply increase effort, instead of building systems that reduce the need for constant effort. Most people ask, how can I earn more per hour? But a different question changes everything. How can I make each hour continue working even after it is passed? That shift introduces leverage, where your efforts is no longer tied to a single moment, but instead creates value that continues long after the original work has been completed. Leverage appears in different forms: skills that improve over time, systems that automate repeated tasks, or assets that produce income without requiring your constant presence. When you begin to see money as a tool for buying time, instead of displaying status, your priorities start to shift in subtle but extremely important ways. Instead of upgrading your lifestyle every time your income increases, you begin investing in things that reduce future effort and protect your ability to control your time. This is where many people get stuck, because higher income often leads to higher expenses, quietly locking them into the same cycle at a more expensive level. Lifestyle creep rarely feels dangerous. It feels like progress, like reward, like comfort, but it slowly increases the amount of time you must sell to maintain it. Over time, your financial obligations begin growing faster than your freedom, making it harder to pause, rethink, or take risks that could actually improve your long-term situation. The shift begins when you separate your identity from your spending, realizing that how you use money matters far more than how much money you bring in. You start asking better questions: which expenses truly improve your life, and which ones exist to impress others or distract you from something deeper? This is where awareness turns into action, because once you see the difference clearly, it becomes harder to justify decisions that trade long-term freedom for short-term comfort. You begin to design your life around buying back time, even in small ways, creating space that allows you to think more clearly and act more intentionally. Small decisions start compounding, not just financially, but mentally, because every choice aligned with time freedom reinforces a different way of thinking about work and money. Instead of reacting to life, you begin shaping it, building systems that reduce friction, eliminate repetition, and slowly detach your income from the hours you personally invest. You start creating processes that work in the background, allowing results to continue even when you are not actively working, shifting your role from constant effort to intentional direction. This is where real change accelerates, because once systems begin supporting you, Each additional effort produces more output without requiring the same level of energy. You begin valuing consistency over intensity, focusing on actions that can be repeated easily rather than bursts of effort that quickly lead to burnout. At the same time, you become more selective with your commitments, protecting your time from things that do not contribute to your long-term goals. You start noticing that saying no becomes more valuable than saying yes, because every unnecessary obligation quietly consumes time that could have been used more intentionally. This shift creates space, and that space becomes one of your most valuable assets, giving you the ability to think, plan, and build without constant pressure. With more space, your decisions improve because you are no longer reacting out of urgency, but choosing based on clarity and long-term perspective. You begin aligning your daily actions with the kind of life you actually want, instead of drifting toward outcomes shaped by default habits and external expectations. Money starts behaving differently in your life, no longer something you chase constantly, but something you direct carefully toward creating more freedom. You invest not just for returns, but for flexibility, for optionality, for the ability to step away without everything falling apart. Gradually, the pressure begins to decrease, not because life becomes easier, but because you are no longer relying entirely on your time to sustain it. This is the beginning of real freedom, where your schedule becomes less about obligation and more about choice, even if the changes feel small at first. You still work, but the nature of your work changes, becoming more intentional, more focused, and less driven by urgency or external pressure. Over time, these small shifts compound into a completely different experience of life, one where time feels less scarce and more within your control. And that control changes everything. Because when you control your time, you begin to shape your life in ways that were not possible before. You notice that the same world looks different, not because it changed, but because the way you engage with it has completely transformed. Opportunities that once felt out of reach begin to feel accessible because your mindset now allows you to recognize and act on them. You stop waiting for the perfect moment because you understand clarity comes from action, not from endless preparation. And as you continue building systems, protecting your time, and making intentional decisions, the gap between efforts and results continues to widen in your favor. Eventually, the life you once thought required extreme effort begins to feel sustainable, even calm, because it is no longer built on constant strain. You realize freedom was never about escaping work entirely, but about choosing the kind of work that fits the life you want. And that realization changes how you approach everything, from how you spend your time to how you define success. Because in the end, changing your life was never about adding more, but about seeing differently, choosing differently, and building differently over time. And once that shift happens, everything else begins to follow, quietly, steadily, and often without you even noticing it at first. And if this shifted the way you see money, time, and freedom, make sure to like this video so more people can break out of the same cycle. And subscribe, because this channel isn't just about making money, it's about helping you take control of your life.